Dormouse are being bred to return to the wild, and the expansion of urban areas is one of the reasons dormice have been close to extinction. But thanks in part to the work of determined volunteers like the group Steve Backshall has been visiting in the West Country, the humble dormouse is coming back from the brink of extinction.
While the large, impressive creatures are always going to capture the public's imagination, here at Paignton Zoo, they believe that the small, threatened creatures are just as important, which is why they've become part of a plan to make sure that our humble dormouse is brought back from the brink. When Lewis Carroll wrote Alice in Wonderland, dormice were well-known characters in the British countryside. In the 140 years since, they've totally vanished from 7 counties and are gradually disappearing elsewhere. Paignton Zoo is part of a nationwide programme to bring them back. Julian Chapman is responsible for the dormice when they arrive at the zoo. Oh, fantastic. Okay. Isn't that beautiful?
The main thing that Paignton Zoo does is that we bring the animals that are due for release come here, and they'll all be microchipped. They'll all have all the health checks done on them and whatnot to make sure that the animals are the healthiest ones that we can possibly release.
What checks are you going to run on this little fella?
We will check for parasites, take fecal samples and worm as necessary. We'll do weight checks, they're quite important. This guy's quite big, we want to lose a little weight off of him. Too light, they won't survive too well either. Make sure they've got all their limbs and tail and everything so they can climb the trees and balance properly.
So basically you're just checking their ID and that they're in really good physical health.
They've got to be 100% fit.
A network of volunteer breeders supplies the zoo with dormice for release. Michael Woods has been a breeder for years, and he also monitors the remaining wild population. I'm going to meet him at a conservation site to find out how he keeps tabs on tiny, tree-dwelling mammals.
We've got the biggest monitoring programme pretty much for any mammal species, certainly for any small mammal species, over a longest length of time in Britain, which means we have a real handle on what dormice are doing and the fact that they are still in decline.
And what about climate change? How's that affecting the dormice?
Well, that is really bad for them. Mainly because they are big hibernators. They sleep for 7 months of the year. And warm winters means that they keep rousing from hibernation. And they've only got fat reserves to live on. And so if there's no food for them and they run out of fat, I'm afraid it's dead dormice.
Dormice must have been pretty common around the UK once. What happened?
Dormice spend all of their summer times up in the tops of trees, and with a reduction in woodland management and with fragmentation of woodland, because new roads are built, new railways, their habitat has disappeared hugely, and smaller and smaller populations of dormice mean that each one becomes much more vulnerable to chance events and much more easy to wipe out.
Michael puts up nest boxes in a grid every 20 metres to provide wild dormice with shelter. It also lets him check their health and find out which parts of the woodland they prefer. Oh, wow! Oh my goodness, look at that!
They're all in torpor. Have a dormouse.
Absolutely amazing.
Aren't they beautiful?
Torpor is like a mini hibernation to save energy when there's not much food around. We're handling them at the time they normally wake up. What are the big differences between these and voles and wood mice, field mice?
These will last for 6 or 7 years in the wild, which is a long time for a small rodent. They hibernate, the others don't. They live up in the tops of the trees most of the time. They hardly get eaten by anything, and they live at very, very low densities, 7, 8 to the hectare. Wood mice, you can get up to 200 to the hectare. So huge differences in the way that they live. Wood mice and bank voles, they can come in and breed like fury and fill it all up again. Dormice can't do that. So that's why they're protected and why we have to have a licence to handle them. We've only got 40,000, about the population of Yeovil, so there's not many dormice out there.
When captive-bred dormice are reintroduced to the wild, they do really well. But understanding where and how they survive best is crucial for identifying new sites to release them. That's why ongoing survey work is vital in turning around the fate of the disappearing dormouse.